Last week, we talked about what good delegation looks like. This week, we're going to talk about what bad delegation looks like and what happens when it goes wrong. Let's go. You're looking to delegate well, you're looking to do all the things that you would do as a good manager. You instead cause a whole bunch of friction, you cause your teams to be confused, you cause folks to be demotivated, and you don't get the outcomes that you're looking for. I have identified in my own delegation 5 mistakes that I've made that I wanted to share with you. The first mistake really is a parallel to one of the things we talked about last time, which is around delegating tasks, not problem spaces. Early on in my managerial career, I tried to be very helpful to people by breaking down the problem areas that I wanted them to focus on. So say, for example, that I wanted to have somebody on my team focus on evolving a data strategy for us. Then instead of giving them the problem space of like help us figure out what's wrong with data and how we can up level that, I would start breaking down and I would say, well, a data strategy probably consists of, data engineering and analytics. There's probably data quality. There's some type of like inventory of what data we have. There's collection, there's refinement, all of these things. Can you maybe focus on the refinement and collection piece? And person B, maybe you can focus on the data engineering piece. And I would break down the problem and delegate chunks of it either to one person or to many people. And this obviously has a bunch of problems associated with it. Like number one, you're not actually delegating the problem that you want to have solved. Instead, you're still stuck with that problem because you've only given chunks of it to other people. Number two, it's going to be your way that you've broken down the problem that is going to be the way that the problem is going to be solved. And the folks on your team aren't going to be challenging, okay, this is the way that this person is trying to break down this problem. You're going to get less of an optimal solution than you were hoping for because the folks are going to have to execute on the thing that you're asking them to take on wasn't part in defining the way that thing has been framed. It's hard to stress how important it is to make sure that people both understand what it is that you're asking them to do, as well as them being motivated to do the thing that you're asking them to do. This is connected to problem number 2, which is the management inattention gap. And so what this is basically you delegate something, you found a perfect way to define a problem, you give it to somebody on your team, and what do you do then? Well, obviously you can just go off and focus on other things for 3 months and then come back and say, hey, did you complete the task that I asked you to complete? Or did you, the problem that you were given, did you solve it in a way that was what I was looking for? And 9 times out of 10, if that's the tack that you take, then no, that's not what the outcome of that is going to be. They're either going to be stuck not figuring out how to tackle a roadblock, or they will have solved the thing in the wrong way. Maybe they've done something that you didn't want them to do. And in general, you're going to sit there with a solution to a problem that you didn't necessarily have to begin with. Most of the times when this happens, it's not because of the team, it's because of you and because of the fact that you didn't delegate this thing properly and you didn't set up mechanisms to follow up. When you delegate, in particular, complex pieces of work, you need to make sure that you have some type of follow-up mechanism. Either you talk about it on one-on-ones or you have separate meetings to talk about it, to give feedback, to help hone in so you get the thing that you're asking for. But if you don't, you have nobody to blame but yourself for your inattention not leading to the results that you're looking for. The third thing is also something we talked about last week, which is task-relevant maturity. And really the anti-pattern here is either delegating something that is way too trivial for where somebody is in their career or in a way too simple form, or something that is way too complicated for where they are in their career. If you take a recent grad engineer just out of university and you tell them, hey, we have an entirely new mobile architecture that we need to craft for our 4 mobile teams. You are now the lead architect of that. That's a task that they're very likely going to fail with because that's incredibly complicated and requires having seen similar things before and having built up a library of experience to even have a reasonable shot at solving a thing like that. One of 2 things will happen. Either the person will get stuck and they will be completely demotivated and they will have no idea what they're going to do and they'll think that they've failed on something that was a reasonable expectation because you were the one that gave it to them. Or number 2, they're going to make a big old mess about it because they're going to try their hardest to do the thing that you ask them to do. And if they're really ambitious and really good, they're going to find a way to do it. But it's not going to give you the output that you're looking for. And instead, it might just be a lot of stuff for you to clean up afterwards. The flip side of task relevant maturity is when you give somebody on your team something that is too trivial for them for where they are in their career. My expectation would be for anybody on the team, there's nothing that's really beneath them. But if you're consistently giving somebody on your team responsibility for things that are way below where you could be giving them, given their seniority, you're both underutilizing them as well as making them a retention risk, because after a while, they're going to figure out that you don't know how to get the best out of them and they're going to leave and find a manager that can. The fourth thing is making sure that you know the WIP limit, that is the amount of work that somebody on your team has and can take on. If you have somebody on your team that is stretched thin with important work, then you can't just delegate more things on top of them. Say that you have this whole data strategy and you figured out you're going to have to give ownership of the entire strategy to somebody on your team for them to be able to solve it in a good way. Maybe you would want to give it to your top performer because it's an important and amorphous area. But that person, they might be occupied running one of your most important programs at the moment. And so is it really responsible for you to load two highly complicated and complex things on top of them? I think not, and I think that's going to lead to complexity and failure. Now, sometimes you'll be stuck with situations where, because of the fact that you want to delegate problem spaces, because of the way that you've sliced your org, there's no way to avoid delegating all of the most important things into one person because there's nobody else that has an underlying problem space that connects to those important things. And in that case, as a manager, you need to lean in pretty heavily and you need to help them navigate where to invest their time and how they can find folks on their teams in turn that can own these problem spaces. And maybe you should even be taking on direct ownership of one of the two things with some folks on that team to help the person that reports to you to be able to do the important things that you need them to do. The fifth and final delegation trap is what I call your level problems. And it's when you delegate something to somebody that they are unable to carry out because of issues that exist at your level in the organization. And I think this is probably a pattern that's more common in larger organizations. But what it is imagine that you're the head of a department and there's a peer department that you have to collaborate with on a bunch of things to get things done. However, the two departments have wildly different strategies and wildly different aims. And so whenever you're going to collaborate, you're going to run into each other because you can't agree on why do we do thing A or thing B, like why is this thing important and why, or should we instead be doing that thing? If you have that level of misalignment between you and another VP, say, then part of your job is to sit down and tease out why that misalignment is there and then basically find a way to uncloak it so that your teams can collaborate smoothly. Sometimes there's a misalignment there and it's well understood and you need to find mechanisms to cope and work around it. And sometimes you will have folks on your team that are really expert at navigating these types of situations. And so you're not going to feel as affected by it. But more often than not, the team will be struggling. And the reason that you're not going after it is that it seems to be working out fine and you're uncomfortable getting into that conversation with the peer that you should be getting into. And so when you have a your level problem, giving it to folks on your team to try to figure out is just going to lead to mess and heartbreak and not an actual solution. Those were the 5 areas that I've uncovered are issues when it comes to delegating well. If there are areas or problems that I've missed, feel free to just drop me a comment or tweet it or just give me your takes on delegation. That's it for me for this week. Thank you.